Okay, welcome to the Fad Dads podcast. This is Seth.
And this is Nathaniel.
And today we are discussing and reacting to the final episode of Loki.
Yeah, so we're glad you're here. We hope you'll enjoy our conversation. And we hope that you will let this be a part of the conversation about Loki and other things that we discuss.
Right. So, before we get started, Nathaniel, you have hinted to me that you would like to take a few pot shots at the series before we watch the final.
I think the show peaked at episode 2, and and I think the show is going in a not so great direction. I don't know that it's going to redeem itself here with this final episode. My prediction is we're going to see Kang the Conqueror or Doctor Doom from the comics.
Okay.
Behind the TVA.
Okay.
So that's my prediction. I think maybe Loki bites the dust here and Tom Hiddleston altogether.
Okay.
But we'll see. What are your predictions here, and where are you at with the show?
Okay, I didn't have any solid predictions. I'm not super into the comics at all, so I'm watching with an open mind, willing whatever happens. I wanted to dig into a little bit into more. What you were thinking about why it is that you think it's heading in the wrong direction.
Sure, and I think we'll save most of that conversation for the very end.
Give me a couple hints.
Sure. Okay. So here, all right. Spoilers in terms of kind of my thoughts, which might change after we watch
all of this
episode.
Spoilers.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah.
For this entire conversation.
For the entire show, episode 1 through 5, and then when we're done watching it for episode 6 as well. I think the show is headed in a direction where I feel like anything can happen in a bad way. Where I feel like I don't have a very strong sense of setup, that we've set up things so well where I can really appreciate the payoffs. It seems like they set things up and then they pay them off. And I'll give you the example of this last episode where it ended with Loki having been pruned, and a bunch of Loki show up.
Right.
And we have a smoke monster, and in that episode we completely paid everything off that was hinted
set up,
at.
right.
And so I feel like, unlike something like WandaVision, where there's this mystery that wasn't solved until the very end of the series, I'm not even sure I know what the mystery is. I'm not even sure what I'm wanting to see happen here or expect, because the show has been kind of all over the place in, I think, a negative way, and we'll get more into that. But hopefully this episode ties everything together.
Okay. All right. And with that, let's start it. All right, Nathaniel, have at it.
Okay, so we just finished watching episode 6 of season 1.
And about halfway through, I could just hear Nathaniel, oh man, exasperated.
But I felt like halfway through, you were starting to get a little bit
bored. I was bored.
Yeah.
For sure.
I love the score.
Yeah.
You're a music guy. What was your take on that?
Yes, I've always loved the theme that they have. It's strong. Maybe it doesn't reflect Loki's character so much. It's just kind of like this deep booming, boom, 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 boom. Which is cool. It's kind of mysterious. I guess it's got that going for it.
Has more of an ominous sound than like a trickster, random chaos type sound to it.
Yeah.
Where I feel like when the Loki title card shows up, that music, except for this episode, all the previous episodes had that kind of that crazy chaotic music that really works.
Right, yeah. It was kind of like, have you ever seen Daredevil, the Netflix Daredevil?
You know what? I have seen a little bit of Netflix's Daredevil, and that intro, it sounds almost the same.
Yeah, it's very similar, but it fits. It fits Loki.
Yes.
Maybe even more than it fit Daredevil.
I think so.
But I still really like Daredevil's intro.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think it suffers from it not fitting, but it's a great piece.
Yeah. And and as a side note, on the Daredevil one, I love the intro. I'll watch it whenever I'm rewatching like the series or whatever. I will watch the intro. It's awesome.
Well, I think the Daredevil intro, and a little bit like this intro too, it helps set the mood. Like you have the elements of justice that I think is part of the Daredevil opening theme. You see the scales, which plays a part because first of all, he's a lawyer, and second of all, he's also trying to figure out what justice is as he tries to take down organized crime, which can be very difficult to do within the law. And then also with Loki, where you see the different fonts where the letters kind of flash. I think that represents kind of all the variations and like the variants, but also just chaos.
Reflective of his character. Very solid opening, and always set the mood for every episode, and kind of building on this puzzle of what's going on and who's the guy at the top. It's all been it's a solid lead-in, to say the least. So that I think is really strong. And you mentioned the sets. You really like the sets.
I think the set design is so good.
I love how they really diversified. How they were hopping all over, like, time, locations, planets.
I mentioned the second episode being my favorite episode because I think when they go to like that food repository in the storm. I think when the first time they go there, I go, the scope of the show could basically be limitless because this is awesome. It's like going through a futuristic Walmart in the apocalypse.
And
it felt so good. And right from the very end, that when they go to the castle, although the set piece is really good, the lighting is really good. We stayed there for so long that it started to get a little bit samey. I thought, like, okay, so. And you see this sometimes in TV where, you reuse the same sets, but I felt like we just stayed there for like 15 minutes.
Yeah, and we did.
Literally.
No, we were there the whole movie. The only thing outside of that was the TVA. And then
which we've seen before. We've seen the TVA every single episode, the interior.
And there was that one little side thing in Ohio.
Yeah, but anybody can book a classroom.
Right. Okay, and here's the thing. I didn't understand how she's a variant. Because when you're a variant, they take you out of your timeline. Right? So I didn't understand how she was in that timeline and outside the timeline as a variant. Well,
I think... okay, so this is my speculation on the show. Because they say that everyone who works for the TVA is a variant.
Right.
I think it just means that there's a sacred timeline and everyone's in there. So like Loki is in that sacred timeline, and the variant who comes out of there, right? So there's one version of Loki that is captured by the Avengers, never goes to the TVA, and he's killed by Thanos. And there's many of these other variants, which gets complicated. Maybe we'll touch on later. That this variant was the one who escaped using the Tesseract.
Right.
And so it's my impression that there could be many variants, but there's one true Loki. And that stays with the timeline that, like I said, gets killed by Thanos.
Okay. So they pulled her variant out of a different timeline, basically.
Right. Okay. That's my speculation, right?
That makes more sense to me because up to this point, it kind of seemed like they pulled someone out and they were like out of that timeline and that they didn't stray too far from it. I guess it's like
right, and that's is I feel like we could be talking about this for literally hours about how the variant thing just doesn't make sense. For example, we're treated to some versions of Loki that are just crazy town. You have an alligator Loki,
right?
Which it's like how does that even work? Wouldn't you have just as many Tom Hiddleston variants? And they said there's only one female version of Loki. Like they had never met a female version of variant of Loki before. And like, wouldn't that be more common, a female version of Loki, than an alligator version of Loki? I don't understand how this works. And I feel like they didn't even try to explain it. So I'm not even going to try to unpack it because I feel like that's as much energy as they put into breaking it down.
Fair enough.
Okay, so let's talk about the cast for a minute. What do you think about Almost everyone's new.
Right.
You saw the character of Sif come back for an episode,
which
she's barely in it.
She was barely in the Thor ones either. I mean,
but when she comes on screen, you're like, hey, I know her. She was in one of those movies.
Yeah. I felt like if we were in the theater watching it, she might have gotten applause, but I wouldn't have cared to applaud because I was like, yeah, we've seen her before.
Right. It wasn't even like Captain America in Thor: The Dark World. When Loki turns into Captain America for that very brief, like that would have got some cheers from the crowd. Whereas I feel Sif is sort of like,
you've seen it before.
Yeah, it's like,
right.
That's nice. So what do you think about the all new cast? How does this work?
Well, let's see. I mean, Mobius,
Owen Wilson.
I liked his character. It was convincing. Because we're dealing with such an odd world, it's difficult to relate to them as far as motive goes. At first, he seems it's difficult to determine what his motive because he's just kind of doing his job.
Right.
And so
he has that conversation with Loki where he says, "I believe we're doing the right thing." I think this is in the second episode. Where he says, it doesn't. Because Loki's asking him all these questions, and he's like, I believe that we're doing the right thing. I believe that we were created to do everything.
Yeah.
Even though it was based on a lie, is what it ended up being. But you kind of feel like that's his motivation. That I have this faith. He doesn't believe it's blind, but that's what he's going by. He's going by faith.
Yeah. So later when he starts unraveling it, then you can definitely see his motive as being one of truth. Right. Where he's a pursuer of truth, and it turns out that that's his coworker or leader's motivation, also in a way. Mm-hmm. But hers is a little bit more dedicated in loyalty to the TVA than his is.
Right.
Which it make it difficult to relate to her also, because honestly, I trusted the Lokis a lot more than I trusted her, as far as motivation goes. Right. Because it seemed like she had the absolute blind faith, and I even had the suspicion that she knew the answers because of how loyal she was when she obviously knew that something was wrong.
Yeah, it definitely seemed that she knew that she was a variant.
Yeah. She knew she didn't have the truth, and for that reason, I felt that she knew the truth. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So she didn't have the same pursuit of truth that he did, and yet in the end, that's still what she chooses.
Right.
Even though she made and took steps to dissuade the Lokis from finding it.
Right.
Which was odd. So I guess I have that to question. But I thought she was also that was a good actress. Played her part very solidly.
He Who Remains, right?
Yeah.
Obviously, he has a variant who's going to be Kang the Conqueror. He mentions that he's the Conqueror,
right?
And I'm sure there's a million fanboys who I knew when he said Conqueror who he was.
The Conqueror.
And he was kind of wacky, but I liked him. I thought, hey, I'm digging this. But I see. Skepticism in your eyes.
Marvel doesn't need more wacky. It has enough. I think that's Marvel's way of keeping it lighthearted.
But I think coming off a very serious villain like Thanos, just having a character. Now I'm sure his variant, who is Kang the Conqueror, will probably not be as wacky. But for just that 20 minutes that we were with him, I was like, okay, I appreciate the energy that he's putting on screen, especially since we're spending 20 minutes just sitting at a desk, just talking.
Yeah.
Can you imagine somebody who's like really boring and really serious and, strike me down and you can be strong and
that's a very fair point. I didn't think about that, but I felt like it's been a Marvel thing as of lately, where like Thor, for example, was a very stoic character,
right? And
then they were just like, give him a little bit more, more of a playful attitude,
right? Taika Waititi comes over and he goes like, "Woo, time to go wild!" Everyone's a comedian in my movies.
And that's what it seems like. Is that now every Marvel movie character is kind of a bit of a comedian. They've all kind of got these quippy, very lighthearted, which is, I guess, it's fine. It's Marvel. That's kind of their thing. Their niche is the very quippy characters. Star-Lord is very much the quip. Tony Stark, the OG, you know?
Yes.
Which just having him be that quippy character would have been fine. But it seems like... So I guess when I saw this Kang guy start also being kind of quippy or weird, it was just like... It's like... Yeah, okay.
Right.
You had to go with something. I guess you could just go back to what you're good at, right?
Right.
So,
like, if it broke, don't fix it. And
right.
Clearly, that was work. That's worked well for Marvel. I'm gonna leap into something here.
Yeah.
That this is one of the things that's frustrated me the most. Mm-hmm. No, I don't know about that. There's a lot of things that frustrate me the most about the series. But Tom Hiddleston, who I love, I think he's been a huge asset to the Marvel Cinematic Universe. I love his characterization of Loki. I kind of feel like he is riding in the backseat of his own series. Yeah. And this whole show. Even at the very end, he's such a passive character. And it seems like Sylvie is the active character. She's the one who's actually making decisions and making stuff happen. While Loki is kind of like, I'm just going to go from one thing to the other, not really doing anything. I feel like he feels like a kind of a college student who's done 2 years in one major, and it's like, I'm going to change majors, I guess. And
well, I know what you mean, and I've heard it. I've heard where I heard it, but it's very important for characters to be making decisions in movies because that's what drives character arcs. Makes the movie interesting.
Right,
is when your character is making decisions.
Because if they're not the ones making decisions, the audience is going, okay, well then, I feel like you should have picked a different main character.
Yeah, right. Yeah, you're right. And so like when he's plucked, like he makes the decision to leap initially out of his timeline someplace else thereby creating a variant, right?
Right.
And so from there on, he's taken by the TVA, and then from then to when he chases after Sylvie, he does not make a decision by himself.
Right. Yes.
His one decision is chasing Sylvie.
Right. And which he does again and again and again. And that's the lens. And where I feel like it's a little dishonest to say that he's looking like you're just when Sylvie accuses him of okay. All right. when she accuses him of trying to take the throne, I feel like that's has not even been on my mind as one of his motivations ever since the show started. Like that's never been, at first he's sort of like, I'm going to escape and take over the TVA. But that's kind of it. They don't really lean into that. And by the time they accuse him of that again, I feel like he's never struggled with that in the show.
I think they took care of that early on in the first episode.
Right.
When he saw the Infinity Stones, that they were useless. And he was like, what was his line? Is this the greatest power on Earth? And then you're just like,
which does a great job to set the tone. I really like that scene because it was like, the things that to kind of pull it back to our level. If we're like, okay, so you become the president and you have control of the nuclear arsenal, and then the guy advises you says, oh, that's nothing. We have spaceships, we have Space Force. it's like way better, and you're like, oh well, this doesn't mean anything. And so it's like I want that next, like I want to understand what's the power there, which I thought would that be a good motivation, but
well, and it's okay if he changed, right? If he deviated from his typical passion of I want power, so that's what he gravitates towards more of an introspective, where he's going on a path internally inside of himself.
But then stop making the show out him being a trickster if he's not.
Right.
And this is one of my big beefs is this is the dumbest Loki on screen of any iterations. He's not cunning. He's not conniving. He doesn't have any master plans. He really just feels like a shell of himself compared to the other movies where he's always got a plan. He's always got somebody there. He does feel like he's on this, like you said, this introspective inner journey that he's trying to resolve. And I feel like that doesn't work for a main character in this show.
Yeah.
Because he just spends the whole time kind of trying to find himself.
Yeah, right. And I think that's what they wanted to go with. Maybe they didn't think it through enough. But, because when I saw that they were going to make this, when they released their whole slate of, these are upcoming projects, I was like, might like that one, might like that one. I saw Loki and I was like, I don't know if I... And unlike you, I didn't actually like Loki very much from the Avengers.
Okay.
Tom Hiddleston is a great actor. I just never cared for the character of Loki. He was the villain. I didn't like him, And so... when he kept showing up...
Hot take, by the way.
Yeah. when he showed up again in the Thor: The Dark World, I was like, I don't care. You know, when he died in Infinity War, I was like, I again don't care.
Okay.
I didn't care for him in Ragnarok either. And
they did this interesting thing in Ragnarok where he goes to betray Thor, and then Thor kind of like, oh, you're so predictable, and like, kind of stuns him.
Yeah.
And he says, the problem is life is about growth, and you keep doing the same old things over and over again, which I thought was really good because it felt like at that point we had recycled everything Loki by the time Thor Ragnarok came around.
Yeah.
And then it was time for something new. And of course, then they, Thanos kind of kills him. And then, they backtrack all of that growth to the Battle of New York, and they suck him out and then try to teach him character growth, and then he does nothing with it.
Was Loki a character that we cared enough to know about his inner workings and see him take a character journey into a different person? Is that... I didn't care enough about Loki to begin with to take that journey.
And I think that's a fair question, but I think what you're seeing at least with WandaVision, is that worked really well to make me invested more in Wanda and Vision, characters I did not care about. But once that show comes out, the next time I see them on screen, I'm going to go, hey, this is a lot more interesting because I know a lot more about them. And if they're a part of the Avengers, I hope they're a bigger part of the Avengers based on WandaVision. This show... I think it does nothing for the legacy of Loki, honestly.
Yeah.
And this is something that I don't like is with the marketing, is they marketed the show about him, and I feel like it's Sylvie's show,
right?
And he's kind of just along for the ride. So.
Yeah. I completely agree with that. I agree. I cared a lot more about Wanda and Vision after seeing the show. But those were characters that I cared a fair amount before.
Okay.
And I'm wondering why, because Loki and them, they all got character moments in previous Marvel films.
Yeah. Right.
So I don't know. Maybe it was just they seem maybe a little bit more genuine as people. Where Loki's supposed to be this arrogant, narcissistic god. Right.
Yeah.
Where I just never connected with his character. Where Wanda and Vision seemed a little bit more personable, maybe. So yeah, I see what you're saying. How these shows kind of help them push forward their characters and help us care about them more. But it was not a character journey that benefited in any way.
There's a couple of things that I think about where there's this plot thread that they have running where Loki falls in love with himself. Why don't you talk about that? What do you think about that thread?
And actually, I have this question for you relating to that. I know you. Okay, but hear me out here. I thought about that. I thought we were going to talk about it, so I thought about it a little bit. And I think the deepest question that you can get here is what makes a person an individual person.
Okay, all right, we're going heavy here. All right.
Okay, yeah. I want to take a deep dive into that because I think that's the inner part of that question. Loki falling in love with himself, because I would argue he doesn't fall in love with himself.
Yeah, I think that's true.
It's sold there, but I think that even though they're supposed to be variants of the same person, I think they're completely separate people.
Right.
And that their life experience, and their environments, personalities, I mean, obviously, the physical selves, completely different people.
Right. Just growing up different, male and female.
Right.
You're gonna have just radically different views in the world, even in a fantasy show where crazy stuff happens.
Yeah.
What I thought would have been an interesting thread, and they didn't go here, is if they were more alike, and they really weren't. Like I don't know about you, there was not a single second where I believed that Sylvie was Loki. And the show didn't even either because they gave her a different name, right? They didn't even call her Loki.
Right.
Right? Why didn't she come up with a different name for him? And right. So I feel like the show didn't even commit, that they weren't even convinced that she was Loki.
Right.
And that was, I felt that was tough because I felt like they could just make a new character. It doesn't have to be a variant of Loki. Mm-hmm. Where it would have been interesting that if she was.
You couldn't call the show Loki anymore.
But I feel like there was a little bit of hoodwink there, I think, where they marketed the show, but that's Tom Hiddleston's show, but it's really not. Right, they marketed it with just Loki, but it really should have had the two of them on it.
Right,
And I think that was very frustrating for me, because when you set your expectations that, oh, this is what the show is going to be, and then you kind of hoodwink the audience and say, haha, it's actually not about Loki, it's about Loki and Sylvie and Owen Wilson.
Yeah.
I didn't like that. I wish they would have been more upfront about what the show was going to be, and were more honest with the promotional materials.
Yeah, I could definitely see that.
One thing I do want to get back to, falling in love with himself, that if she was more like him, like really more like they wrote them very similar, and then he fell in love with that, but then realized that these attributes that I have are really annoying. All the lying and scheming, and that could be a catalyst for change. That I thought. Now they didn't explore that thread, so moot point.
Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. Because I think in spreadsheets at my work, I thought of it as like a spreadsheet, right? When you make a copy and you paste it someplace else, like you can still have the same cell inside of the spreadsheet, like
right.
A3, A1, whatever. But you can alter them, and they're not the same. They don't have the same value anymore. You know what I'm saying? And so, when I was watching it kind of seemed like Owen Wilson had that one line where he was like, "You literally fell in love with yourself." Like I can,
yes.
And I thought, maybe there's a controversy about it, but I think you and I agree that they're definitely different people enough to where it didn't seem. I was like, yeah, their romance makes total sense. It didn't feel too forced. I don't think.
The problem is it was weird because of the whole situation, but also anytime that people fall in love in climactic situations over a short period of time, I don't know. It was tough for me to believe the relationship. I don't know.
Yeah, and it's expounded on.
How long are consumers, you and me, going to put up with this super long TV show? And I'm not just talking about Loki. I'm just talking about the Marvel Cinematic Universe and all these phases and all these movies where the ending of the show is so unsatisfying that we're going to have to wait literally years for this to resolve. Because we're not going to see Loki for years. We're not going to see Kang the Conqueror for years. Maybe it'll get touched on in...
I think they're definitely going to do another Thanos type thing where they're going to just throw Kang in at the end of Spider-Man, at the end of... Or he might be a major part of Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness, right? Throw him in here and there, and then have another build up to it, But
whereas I thought WandaVision felt like that was a complete series, like you could watch that. I feel like this is, and they even show you with the end credit scene, to be continued. They're not even trying for completeness now. They're basically saying, hey, look, buy all the stuff, and then you'll be satisfied.
Yeah,
and I think there might be a shelf life for that.
Well, maybe, and I think that there's definitely something to be said about a culture of entertainment in which things become popular and then they fade away.
Right.
And we've seen it so many times. People predicted it in phase 1 of the Avengers is superheroes becoming too old, right?
Right. I mean, they'd already been popular for 10 years at that point.
Right.
Yep.
And we're here on phase 3, and here they are popular as ever, right? So I think there's definitely something to be said about shelf life, but comics have also been around for over 100 years now.
Right. Yeah.
And so...
But what comic from the 1920s are you aware of?
And that's the thing. So the Avengers, when were the Avengers?
So Avengers was 2012. That's the movie. Iron Man 2008.
Or the comics.
Oh, the comics. So that would have been the 60s when they would have been brought together, right?
Okay. Some of the earliest comic book heroes were like Batman.
Right. Batman, Superman.
Yeah.
Wonder Woman, Captain America.
Yeah. Were they 40s?
Yep. Right.
40s. Okay. So comics have not yet surpassed 100 years, but 60. Are the Avengers roughly 60 years old?
Well, they've been going. They're about 60. Yeah.
60 years. Okay. Yeah. So, I mean, here we are in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. What is it? Not 15 years. If we're going just on comic books, you can stretch comics for a very long time. And especially with this multiverse stuff that they're introducing, there's an infinite number of stories you can tell.
That's right.
An infinite number of ways with any combination of any of these characters.
But there's not an infinite amount of ways that we want to enjoy them, though. There's not an infinite amount of winning possibilities. And because when you watch, if you turn on Disney Plus right now and you're looking for a movie, there's like 4 or 5 movies that kind of come to the top for Marvel. And then there's all this other stuff that is okay or just downright terrible that you're not going to watch. And if you start linking the bad stuff with the good stuff, like you have to watch this stuff, that may seriously hinder the shelf life, I think. If you say that, look, you have to watch Infinity War and Endgame back to back because there's a serious cliffhanger there.
Yeah.
And either Infinity War or Endgame is like Thor the Dark World, that's going to be a hard sell, I think.
Yeah. Well, luckily enough, they didn't do that, right? Or Infinity War and Endgame were good enough to where they're the highest grossing films now, or
that's right.
The Endgame is, right? So they're making these hits, and every time they release a new film, it is number 1 in the box office for several weekends.
Right.
Even Thor the Dark World was, if I'm not mistaken.
I think you're probably right. Shame.
Probably.
I bought a ticket, so I'm part of the sheep who helped support that one. But
right, yeah. So I tend to agree with you. It seems like there has to be a shelf life, but at the same time, I don't see that trend happening.
But okay, are you watching Loki season 1 again? And when are you watching it again?
Good point. No, and I don't know. I would watch WandaVision though, and that's how a lot of the Marvel movies go. You'll watch some and you won't watch others. I definitely watch. No, you know what? A lot of the Phase 1 Marvel movies are hard for me to watch because I've seen them so many times.
Sure. But I'm just thinking about this show having such a unsatisfying finale.
Okay.
That it's like it feels like the finale is just setup, and that's all it is. And it's like episodes 1 through 5 have sort of been setting up for episode 6, which is just a setup for something else.
Yeah.
And I don't know that I want to watch setup. If it looks good, it sounds good. The action's not that great, but
there was an awful fight scene in 1 or 2 episodes ago. Do you remember that one?
I have not been impressed by a single fight scene, so maybe you tell me which one in particular.
I think and here's my fix to this film. Okay, it's a setup film for sure. Introducing Kang the Conqueror. That's what it seems like. The overarching thing was take a deep dive into Loki's character and introduce Kang the Conqueror.
Right. A deep dive into. Okay, all right, continue.
A shallow dive. Into Loki's character. and introduce the multiverse. It seems like the multiverse is becoming an ever-increasing important thing to Marvel.
Right.
And so they will be going into the multiverse.
Right.
So introduce the multiverse, introduce Kang, and have at Loki while you're at it. Right. This could easily been summarized in a 1.5 hour movie that would have been enjoyable start to finish. That would have been a solid Marvel film.
Sure.
And if I'm not mistaken, that's how most of these TV shows were as films, right?
I don't know. I think definitely WandaVision was filmed as a show.
Okay.
But definitely their approach with Captain America: The Winter Soldier, and this was in the marketing for it, or at least it was released that it was not going to feel like a TV show. It was going to feel like a long movie. And it does feel like a really long movie.
Yeah. So, and that's also kind of how I felt about some parts of Loki. It fit very well inside of the TV show thing. From week to week, they had good stopping points. At the end, I felt like they started stopping at different points that I didn't like, where I was like, okay, just give me a little bit more and I would have been satisfied.
Right.
They definitely could have condensed the last 2 or 3 episodes into one.
Yes. And I'll tell you what, I think, and maybe they're trying to hype up the void creature. Maybe that'll play in more, but that I feel like episode 5, you could almost completely remove episode 5 and just have them skip straight to the castle And nothing really is that much different. So I feel like, right, if you just stretch out the ends of both episodes a little bit, right, the beginning of episode 6 and the end of episode 5, and get rid of all the Loki variants, which, like, okay, it wasn't that great anyway. Kind of was a pit stop, I thought, more than
especially because that was part of the promotional material, was seeing like different Lokis, right? Or
I'm not even I wasn't even expecting the variant thread, and then so you foresaw much more than me for sure.
Okay, maybe not then. Okay, but I wasn't all that surprised when I saw it, but it definitely seemed like you said, a pit stop where they just didn't do much with it.
Right,
It was there
exactly.
and it was gone.
Right,
and
I just remember watching the episode and just feeling very frustrated at the very end of like, okay, I want this show to be good. I really did. But when they do frustrating things like that, it's like, I just wasted 45 minutes doing other stuff. Like we went on this other adventure with a smoke monster. You know, I could have been watching Lost, I guess, for that that period of time.
I guess I see where you're coming from when you say it peaked at episode 2, where it had this very all-encompassing, like, solid, oh yeah, I watched an episode and I was satisfied in its beginning and its mystery and then its conclusion. Yeah.
Well, so when I finished watching episode 2. Episode 3 was an instant watch right there, because the Loki universe was expanding, the opportunities were limitless.
Right.
And then, boy, I don't want to say that Sylvie killed it, but I think they made some decisions when they went to the meteor world, you know, when it's like the meteors are crashing into there. And that felt like it just stalled momentum. Kind of, I thought, very frustrating.
Yeah. Sylvie, and this was a little bit jarring to me, I think, that by that episode 2, was that up to that point, they had set up her character as evil. One that murders all the TVA agents.
Right, yes.
And, like, cold-hearted vigilante.
Right.
Skipping across timelines.
Yes.
Which is a cool concept.
It is.
But that's, like, the villain.
Right.
Right? And then by 3, it's like, oh, no. We want you to relate to her.
Right. right. And this is what when I first they were first getting into it, I was like, hey, this is pretty interesting. Like, is Loki going to fight like a darker version of Tom Hiddleston?
Yeah.
And I was really intrigued by that until we got to the end of the second episode. I'm like, okay, I know where they're going with this. This is not going to be nearly as interesting as I wanted to, because I thought that'd be interesting, you know, how to have a you know, the dark side. And then clearly you have a Loki redemption arc at that point. Like, he's going to realize that Loki, the king, who's murdering lots of people, doing lots of bad stuff, like, the end of Loki, the end of the God of Mischief is destruction and chaos.
Right.
And he needs to become more like Loki, the Asgardian that we see in Infinity War, where he sacrifices himself to stop Thanos, not very effectively, but
Right. Right.
And we didn't get that.
Yeah, I think they could have done that with Sylvie too. You know,
Sure.
It didn't have to be Tom Hiddleston, but definitely have a dark Loki that he has to fight himself instead of joining them together and making them fall in love. Yeah, someone wasn't thinking about that.
Yeah, well, it just, I mean, right, it's just a choice that they made that I think you and I both agree we could have lived without it. It's like
suppose like there's a young pre-teenage boy, right, and he sits down to write himself a novel, what he thinks is very, very dark. And he says, oh, like, you know, there's this evil person, right, who is doing all these bad things, and there's this person who is tasked with catching them, right? And it's a setup for like this crazy action time adventure, right? And then his little toddler sister comes and takes it and says, actually, it's a girl, and they fall in love. And there's this other bad guy that they go and fight together.
It's in the dark castle, in the creepy castle place. That it literally is like Disney came down and
they had to join hands,
which they do to fight the evil monster guarding the castle. Solid stuff.
Yes. Yeah. Anyway, sorry. That was I just.
I think that's an excellent take though. Now we may get in just a little bit of trouble for mentioning this, but I'm going to throw this out there. They lean a little bit into this idea of belief and faith and free will and predestination a little bit, and you have a thought on that, so go ahead.
I'm not sure what their point was. So in the Marvel universe, there is predestination to the extent where Kang knows what you're going to do, but I don't think he's in control of it.
The Renslayer, the leader of the TVA, the judge character, talks about him controlling, our lives, and
I guess the TVA was his method of controlling people,
right?
And when they deviated from what they were supposed to do, that's when they were pruned, right?
Sure.
Okay. So the TVA was set up as this anti-free will bureaucracy,
right? Even though I feel like that can kind of, right? We're getting way over our skis here, talking about things that certainly philosophers and theologians have, been working out for. Like the dawn of time, really, and so
right.
There's, is that taking away someone's free will by pruning them necessarily? This have a sacred timeline. Is that actually limiting people's free will? Because people are still making choices within that timeline,
right?
Even if they have been ordained, and right. The show's. The science of the show is kind of funky, so it's hard to know exactly what they're going for because they kind of mix the two. Yeah. It was like,
and I think I'm just realizing it, seeing this last one, but it's like you're living your normal life, and inside of your life you have a almost infinite number of choices that you can make, and the sacred timeline is basically a set a selection of choices that you make in your life. That is the correct one. And it's chosen by Kang that this will be your path. Right?
Right.
And that if you make a decision outside of that path, then you need to be pruned. Otherwise, you're going to create a separate branch inside of the timeline. And so, yes, you are making your own decisions, but if you make a decision that is against what a different variant of you would have decided, the correct one, then you are pruned.
Right. Yeah, I'm tracking with you.
Yeah. So it's borderlining on that free will, where yes, you have free will, but to an extent.
Right.
Only
to make the right decisions.
Right.
But you still think that you were making the right decisions at the time, though. Right. You feel like you still have agency. So that, with the multiverse concept, it definitely gets a little bit bizarre when you think about, an infinite amount, which, is an interesting theoretical concept, which is really just a bunch of gobbledygook when you start to look into the likelihood of there being an actual multiverse where we can make an infinite number of decisions.
Who is it? Was it Neil deGrasse Tyson?
Okay.
I'm pretty sure he believes in multiple realities. Might want to double check me on that, but I feel like he's talked about it before.
But Anthony Flew, who was also a longtime philosopher, atheist turned kind of agnostic, or at least a theist at any point, said that there's a problem with the multiverse. You still need an infinite amount of explanations for each multiverse, and it just becomes an infinite problem at that point. Right? The likelihood of there being a multiverse has an exponential amount of craziness to of likelihood that it even exists. Right? It just gets exponentially unrealistic, and so we just kind of it's a fun way to postulate, but there's really and I think what that does is it pushes off kind of the issue of our understanding of modern day evolution, where we go, look, the odds of us evolving is so astronomically low, right? Of evolving right from the Big Bang to we're here today talking to each other, right? The odds of that happening are just so tiny that we feel better if we say, well, there's an infinite amount of other multiverse and other possibilities where that doesn't happen, right? Where any number of the goo doesn't split in two. The proteins don't split, and we evolve. And I think that's just a cute way of pushing off the problem, the issue of looking at the actual numbers and saying, hey, does evolution that we understand it today really make sense, or are we just trying to push off the problem into this theoretical and philosophical concept?
Okay. I wasn't aware of that. Every time I've heard it discussed, I don't know if I've ever heard of it as kind of like a crutch for evolution. But is that kind of what you're saying? That it used to kind of just explain away. Yeah, it's infinitesimal, but there's also so many possibilities out there that we're just one of them.
Right.
That happen to work.
Yeah. Right. Exactly. And I think that's what you might find. Now, obviously, Neil deGrasse Tyson, he's Earth. It's
deGrasse Tyson.
Yeah.
I think. Yeah.
He obviously very sharp guy, and we may disagree. I may disagree with him on first things, but obviously, very sharp dude.
Yeah.
But in terms of the actual evidence for the multiverse, or alternate realities, pretty thin. Like, you can believe in it, but it's you start to get to the definitely not follow the science at this point.
Yeah. I think they call it quantum physics.
Yes.
Right? It's just how do you study that, something like that? But yeah. So, anyways, it sounds like you're pretty well versed in predestination theology.
Negative. I am versed in ways of avoiding the debate, because I think, as a Christian, trying to, and you can say this is also kind of a crutch too, of just thinking, right? We have finite minds, and do we know 1% of everything? Like, do you know 1% of it? Do I know 1%? Not even that. Not even 1% of everything there is to know.
Right.
And so we try to hammer these out to make it sense to our finite brains, of how that God has ordained, the universe to start and then to end, in a way that he controls, but also where we feel like we have ownership of the things that we do. Right. And that obviously way smarter people than me have been grappling with that issue. But I also think that we live in time, and even that is extremely hard for us to think about eternity. So, right, if you're a Christian, you believe that outside of time there is reality, and that there's something is outside of time. I guess right. Outside of time.
Outside of time.
Eternity is what it's called. And so, how can we try to wrap our minds around that?
Right.
And this goes into something that I was, and there's a book that I've heard about that I haven't read, but I know a little bit about it, where it talks about time, that your time may actually be different than my time. Right, we think we're going on this linear path on this, right? If we drew a line that we're together at the same point, going towards the same direction, and one of us is going to drop off sooner than the other, right? We're born at different times, and that, if you fly, around the planet, and I just stay here, like, our clocks will be different. And same thing with space, right? You could go around the space, and time passes differently in space than, for the person in space than it is for you. And they go, well, how does that, right? And that person comes back in space, and they'll go, well, actually, it feels like, I check my watch, only 8 days have passed for me, and 10 days have passed for you. It's like, well, how does that work? Are we not in this, maybe we're all like a little bit outside of each other's time, but we're interacting with each other, in that sense. And so, right, there's a lot of different science that goes into it. I don't know it all. I don't think they know it all. I think it's right, Einstein's theory of relativity. And they kind of talk a little bit about this in Interstellar as they try to, make sense of that gobbledygook of a movie. But and sorry, all that to say is the idea of free will with predestination. And I think they both work together, but that I'm certainly not going to try to answer, it all tonight.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Well, I do like hearing your thoughts on it. So if you had to take a side, right? And I know that there's like two sides to the popular like Christian debate on predestination, that God has plotted your path for you and you're on it, and every choice that you're ever going to make has already been decided, or that I know there's like more what is called theist, right, where God kind of just plops you on your little point and just lets you off.
Yeah, the blind watchmaker idea, right. He sets the watch in motion and then just lets it go,
right,
and then we all do our own thing.
It plays out, yeah.
Where
do you line up?
Yeah, well, I think from just looking at the Bible does not present a God who is distant from the affairs of men. That he is active in the affairs of men, even to this day. It says in I think 2 Peter that God is not slack as some count slackness, but is patient, not wanting, and so definitely is interacting with us, and I think also that same passage talks about 1 minute being 1,000 years to the Lord, and 1,000 years being 1 minute. It kind of talks about this idea that he is also outside of time, and that just because we feel like things have kind of gone on ever since the way that they have been, that we feel like he's not there, but the Bible teaches, and if you believe the Bible, that he still is very much involved in the way that things work. Yeah. So I don't think I would subscribe to a total free will, everyone's doing their own thing. I think the Bible kind of teaches against that he still is in very very much control of what things happen, and you read about the things of prophecy, things that were written hundreds of years before they even happened, like in Daniel, and then you see the Greeks kind of follow exactly with what the things that Daniel was saying, hundreds, I mean, it's not hundreds of years, but prior, right? And we have these texts, and you have scholars that say, this must have been written after the Greeks and the Romans came, because this is so accurate. And so, you would have thought that, well, boy, someone would have recognized those prophecies and gone, well, I'm going to do what I can to make sure those, don't happen, right? Yeah. Which is what we kind of see here with Sylvie and especially Sylvie wanting to, I'm going to forge my own destiny. It's kind of what I think she says a couple of times. It was very reminiscent of Neo in The Matrix, where he's like, Morpheus turns to him and says, "Do you believe in fate, Neo?" "No. I don't like the idea that someone is controlling my destiny." Right.
Very, very well done.
and that's kind of right. We don't like to have the idea that someone is that no matter what we do, we don't have a fair shake. But the Bible does teach that we are responsible for the things that we do.
Right.
And there it seems like a paradox. And I'm just trying to embrace those truths, and which is trying to embrace those two things as I read the Bible. But if I was to like extreme one or the other, total free will and chaos or predestination, I would err on the side of that what we do is predestined on a specific path. But I think it's more complicated than that.
Yeah, I tend to agree with you. I think the way I've kind of made sense of it in my own head is similar to painting for me. In that, when I make a painting, there's the canvas, and then there's like the paint, and on this canvas I can paint pretty much anything that I want, right? And I can create, and I can make it different shades and colors, and make different forms and people, and reflect different things, right? And so thinking about it from the standpoint of the creator, it's almost like, well, suppose I painted a man on the canvas, right? And I decided to give him free will, right? All he understands is that he is made out of oil, oil and pigment, and his world is limited to this canvas,
right?
And he doesn't understand it, but he's two-dimensional, right? Maybe I can paint him to look through, three-dimensional, but he's two-dimensional, right? And he can choose to do whatever he wants inside of this world, but that's all he's inside of here, right? So I'll paint him. I'll paint him a home. I'll paint him an earth that he lives on, and I'll make him a family, right? And if I wanted to communicate with him, right, I could paint him a book in which I can teach him about myself, right? And that if I give him free will, he can choose to or not to believe this, whatever I give him, right? And that if I try to tell him about how I live as a person, it wouldn't even make sense to him.
Right. Exactly. Yeah.
He would have no concept of time. He's a 2D image. How am I supposed to just describe form when he's a 2D?
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
Right.
And so, you know, and free will is kind of part of that in that it's I'll give him the choice to do whatever he wants, right? I guess free will connects because I don't know. Mm-hmm. You know, where it's kind of out of my comprehension. Where I feel like God,
I feel like we're trapped in that painting,
right,
a little bit,
right? Where it's like God knows what's going to happen to me, but I haven't done it yet. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean?
Right.
Right. And so he can introduce different things in my life that will steer me in different ways, but you can see that in people, and some people take that for the better, and some don't, right? So they'll take something that God's given them, and they'll go the wrong way with it. And it doesn't always work out for them. You know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. And so it definitely is free choice and free will. And so that, you know, even if God does try to help you and intervene, you still have the choice. But God knew that.
Right. So let's turn this back to Loki for a minute. So we have this scenario here, which mm-hmm. I think is actually really interesting. And it's almost too grand of a scenario for the show. But I thought they handled it better than I thought they would.
Sure.
Because you have Loki who sees the value in what he's doing, mm-hmm. sees the value of shepherding the timeline.
Right.
And you see Sylvie who just kind of wants revenge. Like mm-hmm. doesn't trust, just kind of wants revenge, kind of wants to call the bluff almost.
Right.
Hey, let's kill God in a sense, right?
Right.
And see what happens.
Mm-hmm.
And so those are the two options. We're not standing on that side of the desk. So right, you're in Loki's chair, I'm in Sylvie's chair, mm-hmm. and we're going kind of. And this is what Sylvie's saying. Like, you don't know what will happen if the House of Cards goes away, right? If we or if it is a House of Cards, right? We kill him. We could the whole thing is a lie, and that's she believes so hard that it is a lie.
Yeah,
and she's almost kind of proven wrong.
Right. No, she is.
Because things just go out of control. And I feel like at first the show almost took a so if we backtrack, mm-hmm. there's that scene where Loki is talking about Mobius, about the belief. You work for the TVA, but you don't even know who you're working for or how you came to be. You're just going on in blind faith. Then Mobius finds the truth and doesn't know what to do about that. Just wants to ride this jet ski. Right?
Yeah, right.
And then you see behind the curtain, and you realize that, well, maybe we're actually better off with that control. And
mm-hmm.
it's this. I feel like the show represents, as well as Marvel can, that scenario. And so, what do you do? Like there's almost like pros and cons of pure shepherding, and then pure chaos, pure free will.
Yeah. I think you were onto something there. Blind faith, where she acted on blind faith. That the guy that Colin was bluffing, basically.
And it's also this idea that we don't like people controlling us. I think was also kind of one of her ideas, and that's something that we all kind of look at and go, yeah, I don't like people telling me what to do. I think I would rather live in a world where there's not this stack of paper that tells me everything that I have done and I will say, and everything I'm going to say and have done, and then it caps off. I'd rather if that whole thing didn't exist.
Right.
Which, and I guess one of the frustrating things is I didn't track Loki with how he got to his spot and she got to her spot. Like I felt like they stuck together for a while. What were the things on his journey that made him go, yeah, chaos, not so great?
I think it was a neutering of his character. Like, think of the part with Lady Sif, right? Where he was put into that prison cell box where it was just a looping time thing with him and Lady Sif, where he just kind of gets his all of his narcissistic thoughts just punched right out of him, right? And he has to really change how he evaluates his own character. And I think if you went back, which maybe I will at this point now that I think about it, and evaluate just all of the things that he starts to learn, it's that he doesn't like himself very much. He wants to change.
Right.
That he wants to become a not so chaotic character, and that Mobius tells him you can't change. Yeah, I think wasn't it Mobius who told him that? Lady Sif told him there will never be someone for you.
Right.
I thought there was at some point somebody telling him at some point that he is a stagnant character, and that's a theme.
Well, certainly we talk about it with
Loki
in Ragnarok. You know, just the static character, and maybe it was said. Certainly, Mobius. You know, there's that. It's in the trailer also, but it's in the show where he goes, Loki, you stabbed people in the back literally 50 times. He's like, well, I'd never do it again. It's this idea that you know, can he change? Yeah. But it's still, I'm not sure that to me, and I think there's some good points, right? You certainly see the breakdown of Loki there. It makes him a passive character, so he's less exciting. So I still stick to that, like going, eh. Yeah. But how do you think that guides him in that final decision? Because is he motivated by not wanting Sylvie to go down a dark road, or is he motivated by saying, hey, this is the better thing for the universe?
Think about this. He for the entire show, it's kind of set that we are the chaos character, right? That is our role, it's our job, we've never deviated from it, and there's no getting out of that, right?
We see that in episode 5 where it's all chaos with Loki's.
Right. And that he wants to change. It seems fairly well established, and he has those character moments in and out of the show where he sees it's not a good way for him to survive. He doesn't survive. Loki ultimately ends up dead. Right. Doing that, and that he wants to deviate from that, right? And that it does build up to this final episode where he has a decision to make, and I'm talking about he as in he and Sylvia, right? Where, say, one half of him wants to kill this person in order to break free, and the other person, up to this point, is trying to establish order into his life. Right. Ultimately, the other side of him wins, coincidentally falling into that trap of predestination where she has now created chaos.
Yeah, right.
Right? And so Loki, like, really ends up, yes, falling back into being that chaotic character, even though Loki has been trying to come out of it like the entire movie. Right. So it kind of comes full circle.
You're making me think that I have to give the writers a little bit more credit than I have, man. I feel like I've been just dumping on them, but
as we were discussing it, it kind of opened up to me a little bit that it's like, wait a minute. Sylvie becomes what Loki is trying to not become. This whole show he's been trying to change, and it kind of just ends at the very end. And I think that's what prompts his character moment at the end where he says, no, wait a minute. There needs to be some order. Yeah, I'm tracking with you.
I'm just in the context of the 3 Marvel TV shows right now. Where does this rank for you?
2. I did not get halfway through Captain America, the first episode of Captain America.
It does not get better. So, one of the things I will say about Captain America, the Falcon, Winter Soldier, Captain America, whatever you want to call it.
We can call it Captain America.
Is the show feels very samey from episode to episode, and I think if you watched it, you would feel that way.
That's what I heard. Yeah,
not a lot of diversity in terms of set pieces, character stuff. It's like I said, it just feels samey one episode to another. WandaVision and this feel very different,
unique, for sure.
But also episode to episode, like I feel like there's different stuff. Like you get a nice variety of things, and that immediately knocks the Falcon and the Winter Soldier off the no chance that's even in the running. But you like WandaVision more.
I think in execution it was much more satisfying.
Sure. Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Even with kind of a dull final episode, in terms of it kind of devolved into, hey, sky beams and just pure witchcraft.
Samey stuff.
Things that we've seen before, where Loki, like I said, it feels like the final episode was just set up for more stuff. Not satisfying.
Yeah, no. We can play back the entire episode, and half of it is us just trying to focus on all the exposition that is being dumped on us.
Right.
In the closing moments of the season.
Yes. It's that scene where they're in the elevator where Owen Wilson is talking to Tom Hiddleston, and he's like, "But you do like to talk, talky, talky, talk." It's like that is this show, and I wish there was more to it, because just when the show got good is where they cut it off.
Yeah. Although talking to you about it, I realized that there is a little bit of a deeper side. There's some stuff there that's interesting.
I think that maybe it was too harsh on it. Maybe there is some replay value in it. Even though there's a lot of stuff some stuff to look into. I didn't hate this last episode. I think there's definitely some good and bad. Mm-hmm. Not a strong ending.
No, not
but
strong.
I feel like a fitting ending for the series that we got. I think for everything that built up, I don't know that I was expecting a satisfying conclusion, and we didn't get one.
You set your expectations low.
That's true.
I did not. I had faith to the end that they were going to pull off something, and there was going to be something interesting. And yes, there's something interesting, but I don't think it was interesting enough to make the show complete. Yes. After all of the sitting and the waiting and it's Wednesday, I can watch another episode.
Right.
You know,
the teasing of, hey, this is going to be, we're going to find out who the man behind the curtain is.
Yeah.
And, it's like, it's going to get better. It's if you just hang with it.
Shank.
Loki stabbed in the back.
He's gone. Yeah. But it sets up plenty of the Marvel Universe. And I would like to see the Marvel Universe go crazy, which I think it will. And I think that will be one of the good things coming out of this episode, which I was kind of excited for coming out of. When I realized that what was happening was all of these different branches were being created, and I was like, wait, the multiverse of madness, right? And that you pointed out it's going to be Spider-Man, right? That this event is going to affect the entirety of the Marvel Universe. That by itself was like, all right. Maybe the rest of the, season didn't require that. But it's interesting, and it's cool that moment in Endgame, right, where Loki escapes, is going to have larger consequences than we envisioned just when he escaped, right?
Right.
That moment set up the future of the Marvel Universe.
Correct. For good or for ill.
Perhaps they will go bankrupt again.
That's right. Not likely considering how things are looking, but we'll see.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah. Thank you so much for anyone who's stuck with this conversation and tuning in. Hopefully you'll come back next time. I'm Nathaniel.
Absolutely. And I'm Seth.
And this has been the Fad Dads.